Hello, class. My name is Justin, and I'm one of the TAs for Principles of Macroeconomics with Dr. Manal Blankson. And today I'm going to be going over a few of the homework questions. Unfortunately, Alex can't be here with me today, so I'm just going to take the reins, but I'm going to go over a few homework questions in the Chapter 15 homework and kind of go over a little bit with you how to solve these problems. And like I said, if you ever have a question on one of these, you can always feel free to ask Alex or I. Just send us an email. So I'm actually going to share my screen and go over two homework questions with you. So one of the first homework questions that we're going to go over is types of unemployment. So Mankiw, the author of this book, classifies, in economics, we have three main types of unemployment. We have structural, frictional, and cyclical. And I'm actually going to give a few examples of these so it can, it'll be a little easier for you guys to understand this. So, frictional unemployment, the definition that he uses is it's unemployment that results from the process of matching workers and jobs. So, one of the best ways I always like to talk about frictional unemployment is, for example, take a student, like a student who just graduated college. It takes time for them to develop their skill sets. It takes time for them to find a job. So that would be a good example of frictional unemployment. Or give, for example, a parent who comes back into the workforce after he or she has been staying at home. That's another example of frictional employment. It's basically when you think of frictional unemployment, you can think of it as time. It takes time, maybe to switch from an old job to a new job, or maybe even to re-enter the market. Um, the other type of unemployment we're talking about is structural. Structural unemployment, the main thing I would always think with structural unemployment is anytime you see something that has to do with unions or minimum wage laws, that's always going to be talking about structural unemployment. And I'll give like the definition. Mankiw, he always says unemployment that results because the number of jobs available in some labor markets is insufficient to provide a job for everyone who wants one. So with with minimum wage, oftentimes what happens is when you have a minimum wage that's above an equilibrium price or it's binding, it oftentimes puts people out of jobs. So not everybody who wants a job can have a job. So when you're looking at structural unemployment, you should always be thinking about labor unions and minimum wage laws. And the last one that I'll talk about is cyclical unemployment. Cyclical unemployment is pretty simple. It's just having to do with the business cycle. And there are periods of times, for instance, as we saw with the novel coronavirus, we went into a recession. Some people unfortunately lost their jobs, and so they would be categorized in cyclical unemployment, or people who have lost their job because of downturn and economic times, or basically a recession. So I'm going to go over a few of these questions. So right here it says Yakov left his job as a plumber when his wife took a position in another region. The quantity of plumbing services demanded is considerably lower in the new region, in part because of higher negotiated wages. He would like to work at the high union wage, but remains unemployed due to a lack of plumbing jobs. So this might throw you off a little bit because Yakov left his job as a plumber when his wife took a position in another region. So you might be thinking frictional, just because you're thinking switching an area. But this one is definitely going to be structural. And why is that? Because when he's going to this new region, uh, basically the region has higher wages due to high union negotiated wages. So oftentimes what happens is it puts people out of work. So Yakov wants to work, but he can't work because there's some sort of wage factor that will not allow him to work. So simply with structural unemployment, anytime you see some sort of high union wage or a union state or anything that has to do with minimum wage in the question, you can always refer to that as structural. So for the second one, Anna is a physician who has decided to relocate to California to be closer to her family. She is currently interviewing with several prestigious hospitals in the San Francisco Bay Area. This one is definitely going to be frictional. You know how I was giving you the example of somebody who just graduated from college trying to find a new job. This is also the same. She's decided to relocate. She's switching from an old job to a new job. So she's relocating to California to be closer with her family. So this is definitely going to be frictional anytime you're switching from an old job to a new job. And this one's very simple. A recent recession has reduced the number of visitors to a local theme park. The park has had to pay off lay off, excuse me, many of its employees, including Dina. This is obviously going to be cyclical. Anytime we see some sort of recession and it puts people out of work, whenever you think cyclical, just think of the business cycle. You know how it goes up and down, kind of almost like a sine wave in mathematics. This would definitely be a cyclical unemployment because recessions happen and it's put Dina out of, or Dinah, I guess, Dina out of a job. So that would definitely be cyclical unemployment. And then this one's asking, it's giving us unemployment rate. So the question is, the economy is currently at its natural rate of unemployment. Is that true or false? So basically what we're looking at is when we're talking about natural rate of unemployment, we're talking about the unemployment that doesn't account for cyclical effects. So basically, the natural rate of unemployment is basically when the economy is at full, I guess you could say full employment, or there is no variation in the business cycle. What is our unemployment rate? And that's natural rate of unemployment. So in this case, simply to solve this question, you're just going to want to look at the cyclical. If there's any sort of cyclical unemployment, then that means we are not at the natural rate of unemployment. But if it's zero, which in this case it is, that means we have to be at the natural rate of unemployment. So there's no unemployment from the business cycle. So we can say that's true, that the economy is currently at its natural rate of unemployment. Grade it. Ooh, 100. So now we can go on to my last question that I think I was going to go over, which was contrasting labor unions. Uh, let's just pull this up. Just give it just a second. So contrasting labor union laws in two states. So in this case, we're going to consider two states that adopt different laws concerning labor unions. Um, the following graph is showing the labor market in a state in the north. Initially, the market clearing wage there is $8 an hour. How can we see that? Well, we have our supply demand curve, supply curve moving upward, demand curve going downward. And the equilibrium price right here where they both meet is $8 and at 800,000 people. So now suppose the legislature in the northern state passes laws that make it easier for workers to join a union through collective bargaining. The union negotiates a wage of $10 an hour. So this kind of graph here is pretty cool. It allows you to say put a wage. So if I wanted to put $16, I could see basically what the quantity demanded would be at that price and what the quantity supplied would be at that price. Or excuse me, in this case, yep, labor demanded, since we're talking about labor, but same gist. So we're going to put this at 10 because that's the new wage that's been negotiated. And when we put it at 10, we see at a price of $10, labor demanded, or the quantity demanded of labor, is going to be 600, and the quantity supplied of labor is going to be 1,000. So basically what you can think about it is this way. Uh, Households, they supply their labor. So people go out, they supply their labor, and the firms or businesses, they demand labor. So in this case, at a price of $10 above the equilibrium price, the firm is going to only demand 600 labor units, or 600,000 workers. But at that price, there's going to be 1,000 times 1,000. So that would be a million. There's going to be a million people who are wanting to work. So basically, what we have is we have a surplus. We have more people who want to work than firms who want to hire those people. So simply, be sure to pay attention to the units using the graph at the union wage. So how many union workers will be employed? Um, Basically, the union workers, if we take a look up here, we're going to see that only 600,000 union workers will be employed because that's uh, only how many people are going to be employed is at whatever the labor demanded is. So however many workers the firms are willing to hire, and this would be assuming that every person would be in the labor union, that's how many people are going to be employed. So whatever the firm is willing to hire at that quantity demanded. So and then the last question, the The following graph shows the labor market in the state of the South. The legislature in this state passes strong right to work laws, which basically means that there are no labor unions that make it very difficult for unions to organize workers. So the wages always equal to the market clearing value, except for the difference in legislation. The two states are very similar. The initial position of the graph corresponds to the initial labor market condition in the southern state before the labor union negotiated the new higher wage for workers in the northern state. Suppose that after the wage goes up in the northern state, some workers in the northern state lose their jobs and decide to move to the southern state. So what's going to happen? So basically, a lot of these union workers in the northern states, they lost their job because the wage was set at too high of a price. Firms were only willing to hire 600,000 workers. So there's basically 400,000 union workers in the north that are moving to the south. So what's going to happen? Basically, our supply curve is going to shift to the right because we have an influx of new immigrants from the north that are coming into a new labor market. Now, what's going to happen? When all of these new union workers from the north come in, it's basically, like I said, going to shift our supply curve to the right because we have an increase in supply. We have more workers than we had before, and that's going to push the wage down. As you can see, if demand were to stay the same, the wage is going to get pushed down and we're going to have a lower wage. So basically, we want to figure out which of the following groups are worse off as a result of the union action in the northern states. So we're going to check all that apply. Employers in the northern state, are employers in the northern state better off or are they worse off than before? Nothing really changes for them. You know, they're, well, technically, they're going to be worse off, or excuse me, employers. So not employees, employers. Yeah, they're technically going to be worse off because now they're going to have to pay a higher price for their workers than they had before. So disregard what I just said there. They're definitely going to be worse off. Um, Workers in the northern state employed at the union wage, they're obviously not going to be worse off because they're going to be receiving a higher wage than they were before. Before they were receiving a wage of $8, now they're receiving a wage of $10. Workers who find new jobs in the southern state, they're also going to be worse off. Why? Because the key word here is that the two states were very similar. So what I'm assuming is that before this wage law was implemented, both of them had a or an equilibrium wage of $8. So if that's the case, then that means they're obviously going to be worse off because they moved all the way down to the south, and they're going to have a lower wage now. And the original workers in the southern state, they're also going to be worse off because they have all of these immigrants from the north coming in, lowering the wage due to the increase in supply. Um, so that should be your answers right there. Let's see if I was right. All right, 600,000 for the union workers, correct, because that's how many were going to be hired, because that's only what the firm is willing to hire at that price. Yep, demand doesn't shift at all, just have a supply shift due to the influx in workers. And basically right there, if you guys want to read the explanations on that, but I don't want to take up too much more time on this video. So basically, yep, employers in the northern state, they're going to be worse off because they're going to have to pay a higher price. Workers in the northern state employed at the union wage, they're not going to be worse off because they're getting paid a higher wage. Workers in who find new jobs in the southern state, they're obviously going to be getting a lower price, a lower wage, excuse me, and the original workers in the southern state, they're also going to be getting a lower wage due to the supply increase. So I hope this helped you guys. And like I said, if you ever have any questions, just let me know and just email Alex or I. But I hope that helps you solving homework for chapter 15. Thanks.